Hello to you, fellow pile sufferers. Although in this video, I'm not actually going to be tackling my lead pile of shame. I'm instead tackling my terrain pile of shame. That's because I found this junk, bit of cardboard packaging rubbish, which I rescued from the recycling about 3 years ago, and thought, I know, I'll use this and some other bits of junk and I will make something. But I didn't, until today when I found it at the back of the cupboard. So it either went back in the cupboard, went in the bin, or I got my act together and did something. And so that's what we're doing today. I'm going to turn this junk into some space junk. Should be fun though. Let's get on with it. Okay, so let's get into the build. As always, the first thing to do was get a bit of cardboard to use for the base. Obviously, you can use whatever you want, MDF or whatever, but I'm cheap. I've got a lot of cardboard, I use cardboard. So I decided where I wanted the ship to be centered on the cardboard, and then marked it out and glued it down. I used super glue for this, but something like PVA would work equally well. Just takes longer. And then I had this old bit of, I was basically scouring the place for junk to use, and I found this old bit of like Lego, which was doing nothing, so saved it from the bin, used it for this, glued that down, and got little pieces of cardboard basically, which I cut into rectangles to place around the edge of the crashed ship. And this is because I wanted to build up kind of earth embankment where the ship has crashed into the earth and pushed up the surrounding dirt, gravel, stuff like that. Now you could do this using polyfiller, but I wanted to give it a bit of a base so that I didn't have as much of a thick stand really of polyfiller to harden and cure. So used cardboard for that, glued it down, and then put on some gloves and got out some polyfiller. This was from Home Bargains, B&M, one of the two. Really cheap. You get a big tub, just slap that thing on, just go to town, smush it and spread it and slither it, slime it all over the base, and then work it into the crevices. Get in there with your fingers and form the kind of shape that you want, so the earth embankment that I was going for. So next I smothered the base in PVA glue and took some of this old mossy stuff, dry moss. It's not even dry moss, I don't know what it is. It's dry like plant bits stuff from like Home Bargains again, or around Christmas time you get a lot of it in, or even just somewhere like Hobbycraft now is kind of floral decorations. You can get a big bag of it for cheap. And I just pushed that into the kind of embankment to represent kind of like plant roots and everything that has been exposed from the crash site, and then obviously also some stone chippings too. And once I'd left that to dry, I then took a cheap black spray paint and sprayed the whole thing in a matte black. This will also help seal all of that grit and things to the model. Next I took out a load of, again, old craft paints and just applied a nice dark brown over all of the base. And then I used a kind of a metallic-y colour on the areas I want to be metal. So this old engine that I've attached to the back, and any other bits that I liked. For the colour of the model, I came across this paint, which was actually called Ultramarines Blue. And I thought, well, it's got to be a 40k ship now. So it was Ultramarines. I applied this paint, again, watered it down a bit, but a lot of it was sinking into the actual cardboard, even with that primer on. So we'd leave it to dry overnight, would return to it, and I ended up applying like maybe 3 or 4 coats until I got a nice cover that I was happy with. I even then added in a bit of white as well, because it was drying awful dark. So I added a little bit of white to the mix and then applied some more layers until I got a colour I was happy with. What I did next was I decided I wanted to kind of add a little bit more detail to this bit of junk cardboard. And so the best way to do that was to exploit what was already present, and that was to make a bloody big hole in the side of it. It has been crashed, it's a crashed ship, so yeah, let's make a big blast hole inside of it. So although there was already a hole here, what I decided to do is take some whole like cereal boxes, chop them up to give me some like sections I could use as like blasted metal. And I just used super glue, worked them with my hands into the shapes that I wanted, and attached them to the side of the model. And then took one of those like plastic coated wires that you get wrapped around things like cables, cut that in half, twisted it up, and then attached it to look like some cables and things that are now being exposed. Again, you can go to town with this, or you can leave it out. But it definitely helps add a little bit more of the immersion to the model. With that element finished, now I decided that I wanted to add some highlights to my terrain. And so I got my Ultramarines blue paint, and I got a bit of white acrylic paint, craft paint, and just progressively added more until I got a lighter shade that I was happy with. Now, again, this one here looks very stark and bright, but it does dry darker. So I applied this just gently around the edges of the model to give it a bit of a highlight. With the highlight finished, I then got to a bit more of the fun part of this paint job, which was to take a black and basically just swish the model with the brush to kind of give it that look like it had been hit by debris and that had chipped off the paint. So I went to town all over the model with this, probably too much, but hey, it's fun. And with that, I then watered down the kind of blacky colour. I did a bit of green and stuff to get a kind of dirty wash, and applied this over the metallics and also around the kind of crevices and nooks and crannies of the model. And after the wash had dried, came my favourite part of this build, which was to apply the rust effect. And to do this, you can stipple with an old brush, but what I like to do is to sponge this on. So I just ripped up a kitchen sponge, a fresh one, and then first off I applied some bolt gun metal to that, and I just went around the model and I just dabbed it on very lightly with the sponge. And what this does is it gives the look of chipped paint. So where that nice shiny Ultramarines blue has come away and it is exposed to the bare metal. However, as this is a crashed ship of some time, I wanted to add in some rust. And so to do that, I did it in 2-3 stages. I got the same dark brown that I used for the base, and I just dabbed that over the top of the exposed silver areas. After that, I then took a medium brown and then also a bright orange, and I dapped this again over the top of that area. Once this had finished, I thought it was too orange, so I got the silver again and I went over the top once more with that original silver, just to dull it down a little bit. It's probably very extreme and over the top, but I think it looks cool. So it's the rule of cool for me, and that's what I've done. And when the fun rusting had finished, I then had to turn my attention back to the base. So again, I used a lighter shade of brown, or you can just add some white to your original brown, and then I just dry brush this over the base, and that's going to pick out all the detail from the kind of stones and exposed roots that we'd added earlier. However, having finished that, I then thought, I know, let's make a swamp. Why not? So this ship has sunk into a swamp. So to do that, I decided I needed to get out green, blue, brown, a little bit of purple, and I think even some white. And I mixed this up into a nice sludgy, kind of scummy, swampy colour. And with a bit more water in the mix, sloshed this all over the base. But remembered at the last minute to leave that kind of exposed earth section where the ship has crashed and pushed the earth up. Next, what I did was I applied even more water to it, and I basically wanted to make a kind of murky wash, which I could then apply over a lot of the model. And this was just because it's in a swamp, it's going to get swampy and messy. So I just used this wash over all the recesses on the model. So now came my secret weapon, and what I like to use rather than resin for my water effects is clear silicon sealant. You get it in nice big tubes, and you can just spread that around with rubber gloves to kind of give that watery effect. And then use my fingers to gently dab on top of that, and it kind of raises up to little wee peaks to use as waves. Now, having finished that, I thought to myself, all the swamps that I know, two, Shrek's and Yoda's swamps, both have lots of kind of oozy, bubbly, brothy kind of swamps. So to do that, I took some of these, whatever they are, little dimple things, painted them green and glued them down to be bubbles. And then the finishing touches for the base was to apply some vegetation. And what I had was these three little fake plants I got at IKEA for like £1. And I thought, I know, I'll get some clippers, chop a few bits off of them, and they'll look like perfect swampy space plants. The great thing about space plants is you can use whatever the heck you want because, they're not real. And so with the base finished, I thought, that's a nice build, all complete. And I was glad of it too, because this had been sitting on my desk for about a week or so, what with all the different drying stages. And then I thought to myself, whilst I was looking at it, this is a spaceship. It needs some guns. So I rummaged in my bits box and I found some guns to stick on it. And I painted them up with the same method. I used kind of rusty effect, and I think they look really nice for it. But then I also thought to myself, it's got guns on it now, so it's a 40k ship, really, isn't it? And I've said it's Ultramarines blue, so it's gonna need the Ultramarines logo on the side of it. Logo, icon, whatever you want to call it, emblem, sigil. And then I thought, okay, I don't have any transfers of a good enough size, so I'm going to have to freehand. Which I don't like freehanding, but, it's terrain, so it's as good a time as any to practice. So what I did is I watered down some Corax white, which is a base color, and I gently traced out the kind of shape that I wanted to paint, and then built up until I had completed a nice outline of the shape. Once this dried, I then took Corax white, which is a white layer paint, so it's like bright white, and then again, with a bit of water, painted in the icon. And I think it looks really good now. It's finished. Well, or is it? Once again, although I thought the project was finished, I still wasn't happy with it. I was looking at it on the table and I thought, those swampy boils in the swamp that I've added don't quite look right. They're too matte. They've dried matte. So I thought, I know, I'll put some gloss varnish on them and make them a bit more slimy and oozy. But I didn't have any gloss varnish. So, disaster. Until, very kindly, my wife sacrificed some of her gloss clear nail varnish. If there's a will, there is indeed a way. And so I applied some of this over those swampy, bubbly boils, and I think they look nice and slimy now. And with that, the build was finally finished. I'm really happy how this has turned out. I had a lot of fun turning this bit of cardboard into something which looks completely different. Whether it looks really much like a spaceship or not, doesn't really matter, does it? It's a bit of sci-fi terrain, and it will be quite happy to be a prime feature in any of my 40k, Xenos Rampant, Stargrave, etc. tables. I enjoyed most adding the rust effect. That was good fun. Then I also liked how along the way I expanded the idea. So I didn't intend to add guns, to add IKEA plants, or to add those little, whatever they are, dimply things, as, you know, space swamp sludge bubbles. But I think it looks all the better for it. So, have you built any spaceships yourself? Have you made any crashed sites or any bubbly oozy swamps? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you again real soon.